5. I'm here today with Tom
deGroh.
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 Yes.
Thank you, Tom, for being here. This is
You're very
actually our
Second attempt. Yes.
second attempt at a podcast. The first one was all right,
Yeah, I think so.
except I couldn't find the audio when I got upstairs. So
That is a slight problem.
so
I mean, silent movies were all the rage when this building was built, but
not so much today.
no.
Nobody
Not much
would
anymore.
want to just look at us
Yappering,
mouthing.
yes, back and forth with some old-timey piano in the background, and then we'll have splashes of like one sentence of text for 3 minutes of us yapping.
I knew I shouldn't have deleted that. I should have kept it. See, everything can be content in some form.
Yes, well, maybe we can do that to this at some
Okay.
point too.
Okay. So, let's get right to it.
Sure.
How long have you been a member here at the club?
About 2.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So,
What prompted you to join?
interestingly enough, I was or uninterestingly enough, I was looking for co-working space because after nearly 2 years of pandemic working from home, I was, as nice as my apartment is, I was getting sick of it. So, needed a new place to work, and I thought going to a WeWork or Industrious was a dull idea. So I started looking for social clubs, and the Union League Club seemed to be the best fit for me.
Are WeWorks even still around?
I'm actually not sure. I've still seen some signs on buildings,
Okay.
but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're there.
I feel like they were in the news at one point for like going bankrupt, or I don't know.
Oh yes, famously they were.
Oh, okay.
They expanded way too fast, if memory serves, and yeah, they've run into some problems. I'm not 100% sure if they're under new management
Okay.
or they're still protected under bankruptcy or what. But
Well, you would have had a much better time here anyway, as you found out.
absolutely, because I feel like my story is interesting since you wanted gossip.
I do. Always.
So I joined in July of 22. The club was still kind of recovering from post-pandemic nonsense, and it was the summer, so I was co-working during the day, and I wouldn't see anybody. So I only got to know the staff members for the first 3 months, and when they reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you want to turn your preview into full-time?" I said, "I do, but I haven't met a club member to sponsor me or anything like that." And
okay.
they said, "Oh, someone should have reached out to you." And so they immediately fixed that. I think 2 days later, I was meeting with Stephen Smutney, who was at the time the chair of the Membership Engagement Committee. And he and I had this fantastic conversation. Since then, we've been friends. His husband is one of my best friends. And it just kind of exploded from there. I got involved in a bunch of different groups, and both interest groups and eventually committees, and
Now you're everywhere.
I am pretty
I
prolific
see you at a
there.
lot of events.
I try to be, yes.
Now, speaking of events
Yes,
and groups,
yes,
you have spearheaded the dance group
correct.
How's-
Along with Shireen,
along with Shireen.
yes.
Do you have any upcoming? Well, first of all, how did that get started? Besides you having a love for dance.
It again came from Stephen, who knew Shireen as well. She was running a dance group before the pandemic, but it was difficult for her to
At the club?
yes
Okay.
to gain some traction, and so for years, actually this past January, I officially retired from running a social dance that has been going on for almost 15 years called Utopia.
Oh.
And so Stephen introduced us, and she thought with my experience in running events like that and promoting them that I could help. And so yeah, I think social dancing is very important. There was recently a psychologist did a small piece about how dancing with people develops trust. And there's a lot of psychology behind that, where that if I start moving away and you start moving away, we have a physical agreement, on movement, and that kind of translates into our brain of other types of agreements.
Okay.
And so, dancing with people helps build rapport.
And you do all the social dancing?
I do a lot. My focus has been on swing, blues, soul, and when I was much younger, I did a lot of hip hop. But I've also, my first dance that I ever learned was a cha-cha. Actually, the legend has it that my mom and dad won a cha-cha contest when she was 7 months pregnant with me.
That's how it got started.
Yes,
You've been cha-chaing ever since?
pretty much. Though it's not my primary
Okay.
love, but I will bust that out every once
Okay,
in
so
a
what's the one you love the best?
while. Blues is probably it, and the reason why is because it's in a lot of ways, blues is the root of most modern music. And I have this philosophy that everything that you listen to on the radio today either comes from blues or jazz. Blues has ties into country, blues has ties into rock and roll, jazz has ties into like disco and dance. There are roots between them, and actually, disco people, the second swing era that happened in the '90s was because a bunch of disco dancing Swedes were trying to figure out and find ways of incorporating new moves, and they saw Hell's a Poppin', which is this old time video, and there's a bunch of stuff with, I think it's Whitey's Lindy Hoppers, and most specifically Frankie Manning, who was the guy who invented the Lindy Hop.
Wow.
And they said, hey, we need to find this guy. And they found him. He ended up being, he was a mailman in New York. And so a bunch of Swedes flew over in in the mid 80s or early 80s and said, hey, could you teach us that thing? And so shortly after he started teaching them, they just said, well, let's forget disco. Let's dive deep into swing. And even to this day, there's an event in Sweden that I call like the Woodstock for swing dancing.
Okay.
And oh my gosh, my brain is failing me right now.
You can Google it on your phone.
Harangue. I didn't need to.
Harangue. Oh, see?
Yes. And so it's like a 2-week event that happens in Sweden. And I've got one good friend of mine who is planning on taking his daughter for the first time. And it's quite an event.
So you've been?
I have not. My love for swing is not that strong.
Okay, so have you flying places to take part?
I have flown places,
But
not internationally. I haven't busted out my passport for swing yet.
So, I know you're not married,
Correct.
but when you have a girlfriend, is it a requirement that she take part in your dancing?
No, it's so as things go, often you end up dating people in your dance scene. That happens with mixed results. But it's kind of interesting because I'm in this like post advanced era of sorts where
Okay.
the life cycle of dance is you're a beginner. You're nervous, but you love it. You take all the classes. You're an early intermediate. You're really taking classes, and any dance that you miss is an opportunity lost.
Yep.
And then you hit a certain point where you're just like, you know what? I like the social part of social dancing.
Okay.
And so, I would still fly to events nationally and end up hanging out with my friends more than
Dancing.
and so
That's
yeah.
fine.
Yeah, so
You got nothing to prove.
No, exactly. Like I've done a bunch of national finals with dance competitions. I've proved myself that I can make finals. I don't necessarily need to be in the spotlight like that.
Right.
I prefer to be somebody in the background that facilitates others dancing than being the center of attention.
So, what is your career path looking like?
That's a really good question because so I'm a technical program manager, senior program manager, I've done things like before I was in project management and program management, I was an IT manager for a medium-sized company, and I've been in a transitional period over the summer, and I'm starting a new position contract next week. But part of my goal for the remainder of this year and first half of next year is to kind of reposition myself, because I've been banging at that executive ceiling for probably about 5 or 6 years now, and I need to start figuring out ways of changing my game plan to kind of get into a COO or fractional CIO or chief of staff type of position.
So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you have a plan?
My plan right now is I have a couple of people that are here that have agreed to talk to me and potentially mentor me through this process and give me some guidance as to what next steps to make. Because the risk of sounding crass, I always thought, like, if I worked hard and did a great job and showed effort, that is how I would expand.
Right.
You know, this Tom guy's a good
They'll
egg.
choose me.
Let's promote him.
Yeah.
That's not always the case. So
More
there
often
is,
than not.
yes, and so there is a secret handshake that I might have to learn, and so my first,
Some cha-cha moves.
yes, absolutely, a little bit of tap dancing, and Savion Glover my way up to the top. My first plan is to meet with a few people who can help give me an idea of what the path ahead looks like, and then make some choices based off of that. That might mean going back to school. That might be, similar to going back to school, is doing some certification process or something along those lines. But I think a lot of it is going to be networking. So, like, one of those things is here. Networking in a way that most people don't quite think, because there's networking. We've got a lot of networking events here.
We do.
That are, you go in, you pass out cards, so on and so forth, and you might have coffee with 2 or 3 people every month. That's great, but there's a way of there's a way of networking that involves giving, in that you show your ability to people by helping others. And so, for example,
It's a very good point.
yes, and so I recently joined the board of the Chicago Engineers Foundation, which is, for lack of a better word, incubated here at the club. And that allows me to, one, it gives me an opportunity to take a leadership role in a non-for-profit. I've done a lot of volunteer work, a lot of fundraising and advising, but never quite, I'm in charge of this group
Right.
or this department. And so it's a great opportunity to show people what you're made of and show the type of results that you can bring. And that might open doors for you in other ways.
That's a good point. My grandma used to always say, if you're unemployed, go volunteer.
Yes.
And as soon as you volunteer, something you've done there or somebody you'll meet there or whatever you do shines, that somebody somehow will be like, do you want a job? If it's not here, wherever, but you have to volunteer. Give your skills freely.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
let people see what you can do.
Absolutely.
Instead of always waiting for somebody to call you or, email you back and say thanks but no thanks.
And most of my career has been, like this. Honestly, this is the first time I've had to look for a job cold in over a decade. Because like the last 4 jobs that I've had have been, hey Tom, I have this need. I know you can do it. Would you be interested in helping us out?
Right.
And
Of course, yeah.
then it turns into, a 4-year-long run with a company or something like that.
But so you're back on track next week.
Back on track.
You
Yeah.
start anew.
Start anew. Yes.
Are you excited? I mean, wait. I just want to say it's one thing to be unemployed, right?
Yes.
It's one thing to be nervous about being unemployed. Because in the beginning, you're kind of all right.
Yes.
I'll find a job. I have some money.
So, we'll get personal. So there is, I don't think enough people talk about, for lack of a better word, the oppression that there is when you don't necessarily know when your next paycheck or when your next influx of money is going to happen. I've been very blessed with good career, good life, and access to, save money and have money, so that I've been basically living pretty comfortably for the last 4 or 5 months that I've been looking. But there's still kind of this thing over your head as you're watching your bank account slowly dwindle, and they're like, during this entire time, I didn't go out with my friends nearly as much. I was very much a homebody. Anytime I walked out of the place, I always felt like, oh, there's money flying out of my wallet. And so I think that weighs on you
For
throughout
sure.
the entire process.
Yep.
Then the other side of that, which is I think what more people talk about, is especially in this market this summer, just I probably would send out 100 resumes for one nibble. And at the risk of sounding cocky, I'm probably in the top 5 to 10, top
For
10
sure,
to 5%
for sure.
of
Yep.
what I do as a project
Yep.
manager.
And you know it.
I do know it. And, like, it's actually been reinforced because I
Yep.
took some courses over the summer and got to be exposed to other people who were supposedly great project managers, and like, wow, you guys
Yep.
actually could make your way out of a wet paper bag.
Right. Exactly. But
And
here you are unemployed.
yes, and so that is the obvious demoralizing part that people talk about,
Yep.
especially right now. But I think it's interesting because, like, while I am excited about a new job, I'm excited about some new opportunities and an opportunity to get in with an institution that is about as old as this club, I think.
Oh, nice.
Which, good and bad about it, but I think that most of, like, I'm more relieved than excited.
Yeah.
And I think that the excitement will start to hit probably 2 or 3 weeks into the job when I'm done with all the, HR.
Onboarding, yeah.
All the the 10 hours of videos that I'm gonna have to watch.
Yeah, for sure. When you first get there.
And when I start to really get my hands on what I'm supposed to be doing and how I'm supposed to be making an impact there, that's when I'll start to get more excited about it.
So not to keep harping on unemployment,
Sure.
but when you don't have a
This has been
job,
my personality for a few months, so.
but when you don't have a job, I've been there. There is you're worried about money, but there's also a sense of freedom. Because I can stay up all night watching football on Sunday night
Yeah.
and not care that it's Monday morning, or not
Yeah.
care, but
Yeah,
you know what I
do,
mean.
yes.
It's like
there isn't that Sunday night dread
yes.
that everybody gets.
So that's a plus.
Yes, there was, and
You can visit people.
I did take some advantage of that, not nearly enough. Honestly, I really should have. I had the money, and I should have just went on a long vacation somewhere.
Because after you've applied so many times, you have to stop.
Yeah.
It's just like, you know what? I got to take a step back.
Well, one of the things that really hit me, which was maybe not so unique right now, but I actually got a job offer within 3 weeks of being unemployed. So, and I was, my last day was technically like basically the end of April, and my start date for the new company was June 11th. That Friday before June 11th, get a phone call in the morning. Hey, you excited? We're excited. I'm like, yep, ready to go. Let's get this thing cool. You'll start there at 9 a.m. on Monday, and then 3 o'clock that same Friday, get another phone call saying, hey, no good way of saying this, but they pulled all contracts and canceled all projects that haven't been started yet.
Oh.
And
That was
yeah,
hard.
that I'll be honest, that broke me a little bit because I thought I was out of the woods, and it turns out there's a whole set of other woods in front of me after I got out of that clearing, and so that cut me down for a little bit. It took about a week or two to just
Yeah.
eh.
Keep on
And-
moving. Somebody
then-
will call.
Yep.
Something will turn up. It always does.
Yes, and sometimes you just have to wake up one day and look in the mirror and say, you got to put on your big boy pants and get out into the world and
Yep.
do the thing.
Yep. I think we've all been there. Most of
Absolutely.
us.
You know, it's God bless the people that haven't.
Oh,
You know,
yep.
it's for you know, it's one. It is character building, but I think I have
For
enough
sure.
character.
I have more than enough character.
Yes.
I was one of those people in my youth when I was younger, way younger.
Last week.
I was one, if I was at a job and I didn't like it, I would like go home. You
Yeah.
know, like can't do that now, but back in the day I'd be like, I quit, you know.
Well, and it's a strange, dark irony that the higher you climb in your career, the harder it is to
To-
get something new. And
Oh, yep.
it's interesting because a lot of executive level or senior management level people will get garden clauses
Okay.
where they have hey, you're leaving the company, fine, but we're going to pay you for 6 months and you cannot look
Yeah.
for a job for 6 months
Right,
or
right.
something along those lines. And usually people who have those garden clauses already have an agreement with some company
Yep.
that, hey, in 6 months I'll start with you once
Yep.
this garden clause ends, but they get kind of like a built-in vacation out of it.
Right.
But it's also because it takes that long sometimes
Yep.
to find something.
Yep. It does. I feel like it took me that long when I graduated. Like it's like, oh, I have this, this fresh degree. Hire me, and it's like, you're excited, and then all of a sudden you're just like,
Yes. Well, I mean,
by month 3 and 4, you're like, oh man, I put that on my resume that I just graduated. Oh, okay, I guess that wasn't good enough.
it's interesting how difficult it is to not get worn down or cynical about the state of employment in general. But I think people talk about when I was very young, like when I was in my 20s, I had a rule even when I was like 23 that I wouldn't date anybody younger than 25,
Okay.
and I wouldn't consider a long-term or very serious relationship with anyone under 25, because what I wanted was somebody who went through that quarter life crisis. And a lot of people always talk about the quarter life crisis as these silly millennials but really it's the quarter life crisis happens to everybody in their generations, but like boomers and early Gen Xers, they just powered through it. They got married, and then all of a sudden when they're 40, they have this monster of a midlife crisis, and
Right.
then that's why we have these crazy divorce rates and
Right.
all these other weird things happening. I'd rather have somebody who kind of goes through the whole up to college thing, and then they say, well, what's next? We'll get a job. That'll satisfy you. And then they get a job, and after 2 years, they're like, this is it.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's the great challenge of for years we have always pushed that a career is going to enrich your life, when really it's not.
No.
Like over this time that I've been job hunting, I joined the board
Right.
of this. I've been involved with a few other things. I've delved back into helping the committee that I put together to run Plutopia.
And you wouldn't have done that if you had been employed.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that life currency was spent on
Yep.
the job as opposed
Exactly.
to other things.
And that makes me think about like previous generations who like worked at the Ford Motor Plant for 60 years and only took off on Sundays. And it's like, what?
Well, I think that part of the equation that we're missing with that is there was a satisfaction for them.
There was.
Because somebody without a high school education
Right.
could walk into the Ford
That's
Motor
true.
Factory
That's
and
very
get a
true.
job where they could afford a house.
Yep, a house, a car, send kids to college.
Yes.
2 cars probably.
Yep.
And maybe his wife wasn't even working.
Absolutely.
That's
And
a good point.
whereas in now it's, I remember when I was working at a bank that will not be named, the department that I was working at, there was an opening for a new associate position, basically entry floor, not quite a bank teller, but just early position. And the head of that department spoke up and said, oh, wow, that was my first job when I started there back in 1992. And he's like, what's his salary these days? And they said, oh, it's like $48,000 a year. He's like, wow, I only made $32,000 a year, and I turned to him and I said, that's worth about $60,000 in today's money. So,
Right.
maybe let's not be so happy about the fact that they're
Right. Right.
and he took that to heart a little bit. Is that I think there is something. It's not that younger generations don't want to work. Man, we really got.
No.
We're on a winding path.
That's okay. That's okay. Keep on winding.
Not only that younger generations, it's not that they don't want to work. It's that they see the game for what
Yes,
it is.
Absolutely.
And
I'm
they
not
want-
mad about it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like it. I mean, because I feel like you should hang around with people from the generation, because sometimes I look at them and I'm like, shoot, that is right, or that is true, or we should have
Absolutely.
been, like, I'm not going to sit in this cubicle all day. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They have a point.
Yeah,
And if they don't like it, what's wrong with,
somebody did the math on A Christmas Carol.
Okay.
You're familiar with
Yes.
that, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, most of you already know what the Christmas Carol is about.
I hope so.
But there's a line in the book where they talk about how much the Tiny Tim's dad, I forgot his name now, makes a week or something like
Right,
that. And somebody did the calculations. Granted, there's some assumptions made, but they said that he made about $30 an hour, assuming he worked a 40-hour
Right.
work week. And but even still, at
Yeah.
30 an hour, that's what, 90K a year?
Wow.
Or no, wait, 20 is 40, 60K a year.
I was told there would be no math.
Just for me.
Okay. Oh.
Just for me. So this guy who was supposed to be like the poorest of
Yep.
poor
Yep.
was making the equivalent of 60K a
Yep.
year. What does that say about our society right now and the state of how we employ people?
Yep. So,
So yeah, Gen Z's great. The kids are all right.
the
in my
kids
opinion.
are all right. I love the kids.
Yeah.
So are you into sports?
Not exactly.
So you're
Yeah.
not.
I'm probably going to get a lot of hate for this, but
Uh-oh.
I just don't understand why there's a multi-billion-dollar industry surrounded by people who pretend that they're still in high school. I get it. There's value to it.
Which sport in particular?
I mean, most of them, but like pro football is a big one, right? And I get there's value. Like we've created some city tribalism out of it. It brings in tax revenue, so on and so forth. There is a lot of value to that, and I like participating in sports. But the whole idea of, to me, sports fandom is like D&D to me. There's just a bunch of people watching something happening and talking about statistics, and that's great. I'm not about to yuck your yum, but also it's not. I'm more interested in getting other people to do things like dance
Right.
or theater or something that ignites the imagination.
I can see that. So to sit and watch a basketball game, hockey game, it's like, no thanks.
I'll go to one.
Okay.
Going to one is a whole different experience
It
because
is.
then I'm people watching, I'm seeing everybody.
The atmosphere.
Yes.
Got the good food,
They're
drink.
uniting or dividing or fist fighting
Yeah,
over what's going
yeah.
on, especially during old Red Wings games. And so that's enjoyable to me. But like if someone called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to come over and watch the game?" I'm like, how many people will be there? Who can I talk to?
Who's over there?
Yeah.
Oh,
If it's just sitting there to watch the game,
I get that.
yeah.
I love sports, but that's just because I grew up with sports was always on the TV. You know what I mean? When you were cooking, there's a basketball game. When you're doing this, there's a baseball game. Like it's just part of.
Absolutely, and that was a little bit. My dad was a football guy, but amongst my family, there was a greater emphasis on conversation and figuring out what's going on in the world, how we feel about it.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's I in some ways I part of the way I am is because my father would not. I would be 10 years old. He was in his 40s, and say something like, "All right, you think that what are the values of a technocracy versus democracy, and how do you think technology should influence a democratic country?
Oh.
Defend your points."
Oh, okay.
Third grader.
As I'm eating my cereal?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. Open this encyclopedia here.
Yes, and he, I can unpack this with my therapist at another time, but he didn't pull punches. And in some ways that really helped me develop my critical thinking skills. It's been, and also in my family, at least on my dad's side of the family, the louder you were, the more correct you were.
Okay.
And so that's actually developed quite a good skill for me in the working as a project manager and program manager, because when things go bad, some people yell. And when they yell, I get calmer and not quieter, but I don't let that faze me. They can yell all day long. It's just like, oh, that's my uncle.
Yeah, yeah. I'm used to this. I've been training for this moment my whole life.
Yes.
Are you done? Okay, now back to what we were going to discuss.
Yes. Yeah.
I feel like my daddy did that too. Like, I remember as a kid, if something went wrong, he would always say, "You got to use deductive reasoning." And I'm like, again, like you, I'm 7 and 8, and I'm like, deductive reasoning. And to this day, in my brain, deductive reasoning, you got to deduce what happened. And I'm like, I mean, again, 7, 8 years old, but you remember that stuff.
Yeah. 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 In my family, it was always, there was never an opportunity not to learn. He was one of the reasons why I joined the board for the Chicago Engineers Foundation, is that he was an engineer. He was a mechanical engineer, got an MBA, did all that stuff. But there was never a time when I was with my dad that he wasn't trying to teach me something. I remember we went to the Illinois State Center, which is now the Googleplex or whatever it's
I
becoming.
thought it was the Thompsons?
It was the
Or-
Thompsons,
yeah.
Illinois State Center.
Yeah.
And so when that opened, and my dad taking me around, like, look at this thing. It's a giant erector set. You can see, at the time, everything was clear, so you could see like how the escalator worked. And my dad would break
pretty cool.
down why, how the mechanics of the escalator worked. And I think that really helped me develop my technical sense and also my project sense of, okay, there's this giant initiative that we need to complete.
Yep.
And it's this huge mass of stuff. And it's taught me how to break down, okay, we need to achieve these 5 goals. How do I break down these 5 goals? All right, now that I've broken them down into 10 lines, let's do, what are the supporting activities that need to achieve those 10 lines?
Oh,
And
Dad would be proud.
yes, I think so.